Today we're talking about sacred earth, sacred being, and the presence and the power of life. The presence and the power of life is the Easter story, really, and so we build on that. But as I almost forgot I was here and I was on next, I just was listening to the music and, forgot for a moment I had to stand up next. And I had this memory that was so sweet. I've been here, I'm in my 11th year back. North Carolina is my home state. But just prior to this, I had lived in the Pacific Northwest, just outside of Seattle. And I was living in a home, and it was a beautiful spring day. And if you know the Pacific Northwest, it does live up to its reputation of a lot of misty rain, and the sun's not necessarily always out. And so a lot of the homes don't have a screen door like we tend to have here. It's just a solid door. Well, I grew up, I'm a Southern girl, I need sunshine. And so it was a beautiful day, and I had the front door just wide open. I'm like, I can deal with whatever comes in. I want the sun. And then a hummingbird headed right straight in the front door. And I had a big bay window, and I stood there a moment, and it was part chaos, part comedy, and part divine miracle. Here I am, I'm fascinated by hummingbirds, and so here now I have one in my living room, trying to figure out how to get back out. And I didn't think about it, but this is just what unfolded. I said, let's do this together. And the hummingbird kind of stayed by the bay window, and I went over and I cupped my hands right around it. It felt like magic as velvet, weightless cotton candy. So light and yet so full of life. And it let me hold it, and I walked over to the front door, stepped out, and it shot straight up and then paused just to look back and say, thank you, and then flew right on off. And I stood there and I thought, wow, I just held a hummingbird. I mean, how many people can say that? I thought, wow, that was a miracle. And it was so humbling. And as a minister that day when I stood there, I got a little choked up and I said, thank you, universe. I think that's the most sacred ritual I've ever been a part of, And to me, that's the beauty of life when we really get it. We were blessed Thursday night to have Suzanne Giesman here. If you experienced that, just such a powerful presentation about life and how life continues. It is a continuum. And yet it's like Thich Nhat Hanh said, the miracle is not walking on water. The miracle is walking on this earth. That every day we are part and participant. We are part of this great miracle of life. That life is not a thing, it's an activity. And we are a part of activity. So let's take a few moments today to really think about that in the context of not only the earth, but all creation and what it means to truly know ourselves as an interconnected being. If you look through the mystic traditions, the spiritual traditions across time, what they upheld, and many continue to uphold, were the belief that all of life was part of a whole. That the creation stories were about the creator breaking itself apart, putting itself into creation, and that all are parts of the whole, and therefore all are holy. And I truly believe that. I want to continue to uphold that. And if you look at the biblical narrative of creation, Genesis 1:1, where it says God, the creator, created heavens and earth. And yet, there's sort of a myth that has settled in where over time we've come to believe that heaven is inferior and heaven is superior and earth is inferior. That heaven is where all the goodness abides, and this is just kind of a tramping ground that we need to get through. Well, it warms my heart to know that the environmental movement is the largest and the most impact movement in the history of civilization. That people, and especially a lot of young people, are rising up and seeing differently. That this is not something just to use or abuse or to say I'm living on. No, we're part of it. We're part of this living creation. And when you begin to feel that, something very synchronistic begins to happen. I think that's why in those moments when that hummingbird needed a little help and something within me just said, let's do this, and it worked. It's no different than the grandmother who was at home with the grandchild. The car was on a car jack and something happened and it fell and that car landed on the child's leg. And that elderly grandmother at home was able to lift up that car until that child could move its leg. Things happen, resourcefulness shows up, synchronistic connections are always available. If you don't believe it, just go watch a kid's movie about the march of penguins or something. It's nothing short of a miracle to see how creation, or go watch salmon as they swim back upstream and see these things happening. It is truly a miracle. So to look at this today is to want to look at what Charles Fillmore, the co-founders of Unity, were a couple called Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. They never set out to start a church. They set out and had their own healing, their own transformations, and through that created a movement of people who were studying spirit and life together. And from that were born many things, including some local spiritual centers. Myrtle Fillmore said, I was almost accused of being a nature worshiper when I was a little girl. And I've always loved what I see in nature. Nature is surely the glorified face of God. See the beauty about you, and you'll see the manifestation of the infinite mind. Her husband, Charles Fillmore, wrote, the first step in the realization of life is to know that God, however you know that word, God, the creative, is life, abundance, omnipotence, eternal. And the second step is to make positive connection with this God life by declaring oneness with it. You see, if we look at nature, there is a divine intelligence, a presence, a sense of interconnectedness that is a part of it. It's part of the operating system, the way it operates. Today, you can actually get a degree in biomimicry. The word comes from bio, meaning life, and mimosis, meaning imitate, to imitate life. It's a field of study. There are now degree programs. Brilliant to look at nature and to say, well, if nature does this, then perhaps we can learn from it. That's how they're using shark skin to improve surgeries. They're using spider webs to make greater threads. They're looking at different fish to redesign trains to make them be able to move more quietly through a beak. Looking at nature, they're using sunflowers to improve upon solar systems, looking at nature. A master teacher, possibly a pioneer in the field of biomimicry, was Jesus, because Jesus often pointed people to nature when he said the kingdom of God is like a mustard seed. It's like yeast and how it activates dough. It's like a tree that shelters a bird. It's like a vineyard and a vine or a sower in the field. Looking to nature as our teacher. How many of you find nature as a place that is very restorative for you? Yeah, you probably wouldn't be here if you didn't. I love traveling and visiting other places, and one place I like to visit is New York City. I love that, but when I'm there, it doesn't take long for me to think, man, I just would struggle if I had more concrete than green, me personally. And I feel like it's such a blessing to look out these windows and to have so much of this life right here around us. So let's talk about three things that nature very clearly teaches us that may be able to support you somewhere in your life today. And the first is what it means to live in oneness, to walk in oneness. Now, the very first way we recognize that, ancient traditions taught that we were one with all that is through the breath in and the breath out. That sacred breath that we receive, that we're literally exchanging oxygen, receiving and exchanging carbon dioxide, because it's a system. It's something that takes place to be in this sense of oneness. The little hummingbird that came into my house, how that managed to happen, it's because we're a part of oneness. One of the most powerful stories I've ever read about this in nature comes from the man that he's dubbed as the Indiana Jones of the spirit world. He's a Cuban anthropologist, and his name is Alberto Villoldo. Alberto wrote, "When I was young, more than anything else, I wanted to go to Peru in the jungles. I wanted to spend time with the Andean priest and the shaman. I wanted to learn their indigenous ways, their healing practices, how they communed with plants and nature, how they knew what to go to and what it would be medicine or a remedy for." And so he became a medical anthropologist to prepare himself. And then he sought out and befriended an indigenous Cuedo shaman of Peru long before it was fashionable. And he finally made his way there and met the shaman. And his prayer was, I want to understand your ways. I've learned, I have experience, but now I want to really learn and know, how do you commune with nature? And so as he was walking with these medicine men and women, they told him, they said, "Alberto, walk to the clearing over there. Go back and stand in the rainforest and see what happens." So I turned and went into the forest. From all around me, the forest was full of song. The sound of macaw, of monkey, of parrots. It was like an orchestra of noise from the jungle. After my third step in, everything stopped. Complete silence. The shaman came up to me and simply said, "You're not yet ready." And he said, I had noticed if I watched them walk in the jungle and walk so far until they went out of sight, that the cacophony, the orchestration of sound, it never stopped. But it stopped when he was 3 steps in. He said, "Well, we'll let you try again tomorrow." And he said, "Well, I know what it was. Certain that all of nature could smell my underarm deodorant, my man hairspray, my toothpaste, and my athletic foot powder. That's it. So I washed off all of my Western smells, and I'll try again tomorrow." The next day, nothing on my skin or my hair or my feet, I entered the jungle again, and it was full of song. 1 step, 2 step, 3 steps, complete silence again. I was a bit disappointed, but I looked around, and I happened to see that over by the river's edge was a couple of the Peruvian Indians cooking a boa on a spitfire. I asked them for some of that fresh fat, and I rubbed it all over me, thinking this will surely do it. So I covered myself and smeared it, stripped down to my shorts, and covered my body with the fresh boa fat. Now I walked back into the rainforest. 1 step, 2 step, 3 step, and everything stopped except for flies. Hundreds and hundreds of flies. swarmed all about me and took me to the ground. I got up and took myself to the edge of the river to rinse myself off, and the shaman said, "You're just not ready yet. You don't yet remember." "I don't yet remember what?" He said, "You don't yet remember." And that was it. And so I would spend months, weeks, a few years studying with them, watching, feeling how I began to change. And little by little, I began to get it. I began to remember. And he said, when I realized, and it's not just an, "Oh, I got it now." He said, by now it was a few years later, I was a different man who attempted to walk in that jungle 3 years ago. But finally the day came when I went 1, 2, 3, 4. I walked through the jungle and it never got quiet. And he said, what did I need to remember? I needed to remember that I had never left the garden, that it was my home, that I was born of this, that I was one with them. But it's something that took years and years of unlearning before I could walk and embody that level of knowing. And my friends, that's a powerful, true story. But what a telling story it is. What it means to walk in oneness. One of my favorite meditation teachers, Tara Brach, tells the story of her little son, Narayan. Narayan got an ant farm when he was 6 years old, and he became mesmerized with this little ant farm, just watching the ants. And if you've ever seen anything like this, ants are absolutely brilliant. And they organize and they set up and they work together. And even if a little ant dies, they have their own little cemetery. And so Narayan, this little 6-year-old, had been watching these ants and really got to know him. Well, one day Tara picked her son up from school and he got into the car and she could tell by his face he had been crying. And she said, "What's wrong, son?" And she said he couldn't even hardly talk. He was so broken up. He said, "On the playground today, we found some ants, and all the children were walking around stomping the ants. And I was saying, no, they're like our friends." And she said, "Son, what you have realized, what you've come to discover, that you feel your connection with them because you've observed them in their world, that's what our whole world needs." And she said, "I hope and I pray for you that you never lose that, but it just continues to expand." Can you feel what it means to walk in that sacred oneness? To be able to walk and to know that we are one with all creation. I believe then, the scriptures say in the Gospel of Thomas, that if you will see what is before you, then what is hidden will be revealed. If you will see what is before you, if you will begin to recognize the miracle of the bird nest and the beehive, if you will begin to recognize the miracle of the sacred earth and how we live in this sacred reciprocity, begin to recognize that. From my personal experience, from the experience of others, I know you then begin to commune with nature and receive guidance and energy at a higher level. How many of you know that to be true? It just works that way. You feel that. And so the first point, the first lesson from the earth is learning to walk in oneness. And the second point is to know that life it operates. You could say the operating system is sacred reciprocity. I mentioned that a few minutes ago with the breath. The ancients taught the power of the breath, that you take in, you give out, that there must always be a giving and receiving and exchange. Well, now science teaches us, as again I just said, that we breathing in oxygen that the trees are helping provide, and we are expressing something they take in and they need. We truly do live in an exchange. But here's the point, it's not simply a transaction, my friends. It is transformation. Do you get it? That what is happening is a process of transformation is taking place, and we're part of that. And so this dynamic of sacred reciprocity or exchange is another way that we begin to elevate our awareness, and it's certainly a way we begin to heal our world and heal our life. When we remember to, if I'm taking trees, let me plant some trees. If I'm taking, let me give back in whatever area of our life. In 1996, there were two ecologists, Daniel Jensen and Winnie Hallwick. They were working in Costa Rica, studying forest restoration. And in this particular, they were working with the university, and in this particular project, as they were studying forest restoration, they also were trying to find a place to have a big national park. And so through kind of a chance encounter, which I call synchronicity, they encountered someone from the orange company, Del Oro, orange company out of Costa Rica. And the orange company had tons of orange peels and pulp that they needed somewhere to get rid of. They were running out of space. And so this research team, ecologist who had some land that had been given to them, said, listen, here's a barren field. There's cattle has been in this. It used to be jungle. Now it is just trampled, depleted. There is nothing here. We'll give you this acreage to put all of your orange peels if you will give us the money to buy this. And so they worked out that deal. Everybody thought that was a good deal, but this is what happened that surprised them that they didn't expect. 15 years later, these two came back and went to the place, the barren pasture where the orange peels had been dumped. And what they found is this: the barren land had become a lush, thriving forest. 50% more biodiversity, new trees, vines, insects, birds. It was beaming. It was a jungle alive and well. They said that this is what happened. The peels fed the soil. The soil welcomed fungi. Fungi invited insects. Insects brought birds. Birds brought seeds and life does what it does when we live in that state of reciprocity. They even found fig trees planted on that land, which had never been in that area before. Isn't that a beautiful story? I encourage you, go to the prophet called Google and look it up, and you'll find it's pretty remarkable here. Band, would you come on up, and Joey? So walking in oneness and living in that state of sacred reciprocity, because it is not just a transaction, it's transformation. In the scriptures, we're told, give, and it'll be given back. But sometimes we forget that this reciprocity happens when do you really listen, not only to one another, but are we listening to the earth? When you're on your walks, do you take a listen? What's going on around you? What are you hearing in the forest and in the wind? Listen. More than we speak, to take it in. It's a powerful thing to go walk DuPont Forest with those beautiful trails and stop along the way and just put your hand on a tree and say, thank you. I want to thank you. When you spot something, just look at it and marvel and say, thank you. When you begin to enter into when we begin to enter into that kind of conscious exchange, life begets life. Something powerful begins to happen, and we begin to thrive, which is the third point. When we learn to walk in a sacred state of oneness, when we learn that life operates in sacred exchange. And yes, it is transactional in many areas of our life, but it is also transformational. When I pay my electric bills, it's all automated now and those things, but I take time to say, thank you for illuminating my home. Thank you for the warmth. When I adjust that HVAC, I try to be very mindful that it's not just a thing. I am entering into a sacred exchange. Now, I don't know how Duke is looking at it, but I am entering into a sacred exchange. I'm doing my part. And that makes a difference when we do our part. That then leads us to thrive. I was thinking about thriving this week, and I wrote this: thriving is nature's way. Go ahead, Joey. In the living, it's living in the living flow, in tune and in touch with all that is the sacred rhythm of life. Thriving is not just one notch up from surviving. Thriving is not surviving, but in better clothes. Thriving is not simply a bigger house, a shinier title, or a more curated version of burnout. Thriving is a way of being. Thriving is like the tree that knows to look to the light. Thriving is like the tree that knows it's there to bring forth its fruit or its fragrance. Thriving is like the tree that knows there are seasons, and not every season is meant to hold the same experience. And for that tree, thriving is even understanding that when it comes to its time to fall down and be called what's a snag, a dead tree in the forest, it's not really dead. It has now become life, where little animals are burrowing, where fungi and moss begin to grow. It begins to deplete and go into the earth. My friends, to thrive is to know that we are part and parcel, and always, whatever state we are in, it doesn't mean we gloss over. It means we maintain the connection of knowing I'm in the flow of life. And though my leaves may be falling off in this season, maybe I be going into what feels dormant, I thrive in this state because this state will lead to my next state. And so we walk in the state of oneness. We live in sacred reciprocity. And we become more mindful of where am I just going through motions or surviving? And how am I being called to thrive? I invite you to close your eyes and listen to this song that our very own Joey Dukes wrote. A song in honor of our connection to all that is. To the one that lives in my heart, shelter from the storm. I bow to the one in the heart of all, the fire that keeps us warm. I bow to the one that lives in the earth, the wind that moves the sea. And I bow to the one of the universe, the love that sets us free. And I bow to the one that knows that I am that I am. I am that I am. So we take a moment to just allow ourselves to go within. bow is a gesture. It is a position of being. To bow is to acknowledge the gift, the magnificence, the mystery in which we live and move and have our being. You see, sometimes life can become what we call doing life or doing time, or I'm just getting through, I'm just working through, I'm so busy, I'm this, I'm that, I'm the other. And our very breath is saying, hold on. Step back in to the garden. Don't forget. Don't forget that no matter what is before you, do not forget that what you have put your hand to. Do not forget that what is calling for your time, your talent, your attention, my friend, you are in the garden. You are never apart or outside of the garden. This garden is the garden of life, the garden of creation, and you have been created as a necessary component to be here at this particular time. And when you remember that all that you do, no matter what it looks like, if you are doing it from a place of being in the garden, caring for the garden, caring for creation, and lending your hand to build up, developing your skills to share, offering your offering for good, receiving what you need to restore yourself so that you may go and then again give in a new way. Taking time to rest, to balance, to find your dance. In indigenous cultures, when people got sick, they would ask, when did you stop dancing? When did you stop singing? When did you stop gazing at the sun and the moon? In other words, when did you forget that you were a part of the garden and of this creation called life? And so our invitation is to remember that every day we walk in this garden. And as we wake up and acknowledge who walks with us, when we recognize that there are just as many unseen supports and presence in unseen spirit realm as there are in the physical realm, and that we, because we are a being of mind, body, and spirit, can become the one that walks in two worlds. We can become the ones that hear the way, that receive the word, that are guided. And it may just be the next step that heals a life, a family, a home, a nation. And so we bow. And we stand in this beautiful garden together. And we say, thank you, God. So I bow to the one that lives in my heart, shelter from the storm. And I bow to the one in the heart of all, fire that keeps us warm. I bow to the one that lives in the earth, the wind that moves the sea. I bow to the one, the universe, spirit sets us free. And I bow to the one that knows that I am that I am. Yes, I bow to the one that knows that I am that I am. We bow to the one. There is one. So it is.